Thanksgiving morning arrived, wrapped in a silence that felt heavier than the November clouds outside my window. Hey everyone, before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss stories like this. Now let's start today's story. The kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room, it settles in your chest, turning every breath into something tight and aching. My apartment, small and dim with light, slipping through half-closed blinds, didn't hold the warm smells of roasting turkey or cinnamon pies like it used to when I lived with my family. Instead, the only scent in the room was the faint bitterness of the toasted bread I'd burned earlier, trying to make a simple breakfast, a pitiful reminder of how hollow this day was destined to feel. I kept glancing at my phone, even though I'd sworn I wouldn't. It sat on the coffee table like a taunt, its black screen reflecting my own restless expression back at me. There were no messages, no missed calls, not even a casual Happy Thanksgiving from my parents. It had been 3 months since the fight. No, the explosion that tore me away from them. 3 months of cold shoulders, unanswered calls, and texts that went into silence so complete it sometimes felt unreal. And now, today of all days, they were celebrating together while pretending I didn't exist. My thumb hovered over my mother's contact more times than I wanted to admit. I imagined her sitting at the long oak dining table, the same one we polished together every year, the one that still had faint scratches from when my cousins and I used to play cards under it. I could picture my dad carving the turkey with that same overly serious concentration he used every year, even though it wasn't that deep. My little cousins fighting over the drumstick, my sister laughing loudly at something trivial, absorbing all the attention like she always did. The entire scene felt painfully vivid, almost cinematic, as if I could hear the clatter of dishes and the hum of voices. And me? The chair I always sat in, end of the left side, next to Grandma, would be empty. I wondered whether anyone noticed, or if they had simply shifted the plates and pretended that space had never belonged to me. I set my phone face down and exhaled shakily. The fight hadn't been something small. It wasn't a disagreement that would fade with time. It had been about my future, about me dropping out of law school, the path they had chosen and clung to with iron expectations, even though I had never truly wanted it. When I finally told them I wanted to pursue writing instead, all the tension that had been building for years erupted in a way none of us were prepared for. My father's voice had thundered through the house. My mother cried. My sister called me irresponsible. Accusations flew about ungratefulness, wasted opportunity, throwing away the life they planned for me. I still felt the sting of my father's final words echoing in my mind. If you walk out that door, don't expect us to wait for you. I walked out, and they hadn't waited. By late afternoon, the silence in my apartment had grown unbearable. It pressed against my ears, made my thoughts loop endlessly, and turned loneliness into something sharp enough to cut. I curled up on the couch, burying myself beneath a blanket, as if fabric alone could shield me from the cold ache inside. I turned on the TV, hoping the noise would drown out the hollowness, but even the bright colors and laugh tracks felt distant, like I was watching a life I wasn't part of anymore. The hours crawled by. The sky outside dimmed. My chest grew heavier. I had almost managed to numb myself when knock, knock, knock. The sound sliced through the quiet so unexpectedly that I jolted upright. No one ever visited me unannounced. I barely had friends nearby, and the idea of anyone choosing today to drop by felt impossible. My heartbeat kicked up, rapid and uneven. Another 3 knocks, firmer this time. I approached the door slowly, each step echoing in the small hallway. My fingers tingled with nerves as I leaned forward to peer through the peephole. And when I saw who was standing there, I nearly stopped breathing. Bundled in her familiar gray coat, snow gathering on her shoulders, holding a warm pie carefully in both hands, Grandma. My throat tightened instantly. I opened the door so fast the handle scraped my palm. Grandma! My voice cracked, fragile from hours of holding everything in. She smiled up at me, her eyes soft with warmth, and something deeper, something grounding. "Are you going to let me in?" she said in that gentle, teasing tone I'd missed more than I realized. "Or should I freeze into a Thanksgiving statue out here?" A weak laugh escaped me before I could stop it. I stepped aside, and she entered, bringing with her the warmth of familiarity, of home, of everything I thought I'd lost today. Inside, she placed the pie on my kitchen counter, removing her gloves slowly as she glanced around my tiny apartment. Her gaze wasn't judgmental. It was searching, full of worry and love. Before I could ask the 100 questions crowding my throat, she turned to me with eyes that glowed with quiet determination. "They don't know I'm here," she said softly, "and I'm not planning to tell them." My eyebrows shot up. "Grandma, you came alone? All the way here?" "I'm old, not expired," she murmured with a small smile. "Besides, no one should spend Thanksgiving alone. Not my grandchild. Not while I'm still around." I felt something inside me break, not in a painful way, but in a way that released the tightness I'd been carrying for months. The loneliness that had crushed me all day cracked open, letting warmth spill through the pieces. I stepped forward and wrapped my arms around her, burying my face into her coat that still smelled faintly like lavender and wood smoke. Her hand rose to my back, steady and comforting. For the first time that day, maybe even in months, I didn't feel forgotten. I wasn't alone, and in that moment, with snow melting on my floor and a pie still warm on the counter, Thanksgiving finally felt real again. For a moment, I simply stood still, watching her move around my kitchen as if she had been there 1,000 times before. She moved with that familiar blend of gentleness and brisk efficiency, the way only grandmothers seemed to master, touching everything lightly, as if reminding the room it wasn't allowed to fall apart just because life had gotten messy. She shrugged off her coat, revealing the soft lavender sweater she always wore for family gatherings. It smelled faintly of lavender soap and something else, nostalgia, maybe, or comfort woven into fabric over decades. She looked at me over her shoulder, lifting her brow with a playful mock sternness. "Sweetheart, do you have plates? Or should we eat this pie straight from the dish like vandals?" Her joke cracked through me like sunlight breaking through a stormed-over sky. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. The sound felt unfamiliar, rusty around the edges, but real. It spilled out before I could stop it, surprising both of us. I retrieved plates from the cupboard, 2 chipped, one with a faded floral print, while she rummaged through my drawers, discovering my measly collection of mismatched silverware. She held up a bent fork, as if it were evidence in a criminal investigation. "You live like a single man hiding from taxes," she muttered, shaking her head with mock disappointment. "We'll work on that." Despite myself, I smiled. She served 2 generous slices of her famous apple cinnamon pie, the one she always made by hand. Slicing the apples thinly and mixing them with spices she refused to measure, claiming she could feel when the balance was right. Steam rolled off the golden filling, curling into the air. The smell wrapped around me like a blanket I didn't realize I needed, a scent that whispered of childhood, warmth, and everything uncomplicated. We sat at my small table, one that wobbled if you leaned too far to the right. Grandma didn't seem to mind. She steadied the table with her knee and took a bite. She closed her eyes briefly, savoring it, then sighed. "At least you haven't forgotten how to eat properly," she teased, tapping her fork against her plate. But beneath her humor, something heavy lingered in the room, a tension I could feel, faint but unmistakable. "How are they?" I asked quietly. Her fork paused mid-air. The question hung between us like a fragile ornament. "They're stubborn," she replied after a moment. "But then again, so are you." I lowered my gaze to the glossy surface of the pie. I didn't expect them to change overnight. Grandma set her fork down with a soft clink and reached across the table. Her hand was warm, surprisingly warm, wrapping over mine with a gentleness that told me she understood more than she said. "Your father is proud," she said softly, "even if he won't admit it. And your mother, she cries more often than she wants anyone to know." My chest tightened, as if someone had reached in and squeezed. Then why didn't they call me today? Even just a message? My voice came out small, almost childlike. Grandma exhaled, slow and long. "Because pride is a stupid thing," she said bluntly, "and sometimes love gets tangled in expectations." The words settled into the room, soaking into the quiet. She didn't sugarcoat anything, but she never had. That was one reason I trusted her more than anyone else. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The hum of the heater filled the silence, and outside the wind pressed lightly against the windows as if listening in. Grandma finally straightened, folding her hands on the table. "Do you want to know why I came here today?" she asked softly. I nodded. Her eyes glistened, not with sadness, but with determination. "Because you're family," she said. "And family isn't something you walk away from because of a disagreement, even a big one. They may need time to process. But you? You needed someone today. And as long as I'm alive, you'll never spend Thanksgiving alone." Emotion swelled in my throat so quickly, it almost choked me. Tears blurred my vision, making the kitchen lights shimmer. "Thank you," I whispered. "I don't know how to explain how much this means." She patted my hand, with that same reassuring rhythm she used when I got scraped knees as a kid. "You don't have to explain anything," she murmured. "I know." After pie, Grandma insisted on inspecting my apartment as though performing an official safety evaluation. She opened cabinets, peeked behind the shower curtain, clicked her tongue at the empty fridge shelves, and declared the whole place barely livable, with eye-widening dramatic flair. Then she settled with me on the couch, pulling one of my blankets across her lap. We talked for hours, about my writing, her garden, her memories of raising my father, and random stories she sprinkled in just to make me laugh. She listened as if every word mattered, and slowly, the tight knot inside my chest loosened, thread by thread. Outside, the evening deepened. Snow began to fall softly, catching the streetlights like drifting glitter. The world looked peaceful through the window, and for the first time in a long time, so did I. Just when I thought the night couldn't feel more calm, Grandma cleared her throat. The sound was subtle, but it carried weight. I looked over and saw her expression shift. Serious, almost trembling. "There's something I need to tell you," she said. My heart thudded, the peaceful moment cracking slightly. "What is it?" I asked, voice barely louder than a breath. She took her time. Her hands tightened on the blanket. She looked straight into my eyes with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "It's about your father," she said quietly. "And what he said after you left." The room felt suddenly smaller, the air heavier. I swallowed, bracing myself. "What did he say?" She hesitated, and then she began. Grandma's face softened, lines deepening with emotion, as she looked at me, really looked at me, as if she were seeing every bruise left behind by the past 3 months. She took a slow breath, the kind of breath people take when they are deciding whether to open a door or leave it closed forever. Her fingers curled around the blanket on her lap, tightening slightly before she finally spoke. "When you left the house that night," she began quietly, "your father stormed into the kitchen. He slammed the door so hard a picture frame fell off the wall, and he said things he didn't mean. Hurtful things, angry things, words that came from fear, not truth. But later, hours later, when the house was quiet and everyone had gone to their rooms, I overheard him talking to your mother. I felt my whole body go still. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. What did he say?" Grandma hesitated. She looked down at her sleeve, tracing the knit pattern with the tip of her finger as if searching for the courage to continue. "He said he was afraid she whispered at last. Afraid of losing you. A shaky breath slipped out of me before I could catch it. Afraid? Dad? The man who barked orders, who rarely said, I love you, without disguising it as advice or a warning? Grandma nodded slowly. He's always had a hard shell. But inside, that man's heart is softer than melted butter. He just hides it, because he thinks strength means silence. I didn't know what to say. A part of me desperately wanted to believe her. Another part clung stubbornly to the memory of him pointing toward the door and telling me not to expect them to wait for me. Grandma continued gently. He said, what if he never comes back? What if I pushed him too far? And your mother? She cried. She said she kept checking her phone every night, hoping you'd text her just to say you were safe. My throat tightened until it was hard to swallow. I stared at my hands, trying to process the difference between what I had imagined and what had actually been happening in that house. Then why haven't they reached out? I whispered. Why no message today? No call? Grandma let out a long breath, the kind that carried disappointment and understanding all at once. Because stubbornness runs deep in this family. You inherited it from both sides. And right now, they're convinced they're respecting your space. Meanwhile, you're convinced they don't care. Everyone is waiting for the other to make the first move. A bitter laugh escaped me. It feels childish. It is childish, Grandma said simply, her eyes twinkling with that blunt honesty I'd always loved about her. But pain makes people childish. Pride makes them foolish. We sat quietly for a moment, letting her words settle into the soft dimness of my apartment. The heater hummed in the background, offering warmth to a moment that felt heavy and delicate. After a while, Grandma shifted closer and placed her hand over mine. Sweetheart, she said gently, there's something else I need to tell you. I looked up. Your father talked about your writing. That sentence hit me harder than I expected. My, writing? She gave a small nod. He found your old notebook on the kitchen counter the night you packed. He read a few pages. Her smile softened. He said you had more talent at 24 than he ever had at 50. My breath hitched. I blinked rapidly as my vision began to blur. He said he was scared, she whispered, not because you wanted to write, but because he didn't know how to protect you in a world he didn't understand. Law school made sense to him. Writing didn't, and not understanding made him feel helpless. The first tear fell before I could stop it, then another. They slipped down my cheeks in warm, silent trails. Grandma pulled me close, my head pressed against her shoulder, her hand rubbing small circles on my back, just like she used to do when I was little and scraped my knee on the driveway. For a moment, I let myself fall into that comfort without question. You're allowed to be hurt, she murmured into my hair, but don't assume you were unloved. Her words cracked something open in me. A dam I'd been holding back for months finally broke, flooding everything. I cried quietly, not the loud, messy sobs of panic, but the soft, exhausted release of someone finally letting go of weight they never should have carried alone. When I finally pulled away, Grandma handed me a tissue with a warm smile. There now, she said. Crying won't make the pie colder. I laughed through the last remnants of my tears. It felt easier this time, lighter. We sat together for a few minutes, breathing in the calm that followed the storm. Then Grandma checked her watch, her eyebrows lifting with faint amusement. You know, she said, your mother texted me earlier asking if I was bringing my famous pie to dinner. I glanced up. And what did you tell her? Grandma's lips curled into a smirk. I told her no. I told her I already had plans. My mouth fell open. You skipped Thanksgiving dinner for me? She snorted. Skipped? Darling, I upgraded. Why would I go sit with two stubborn mules when my favorite grandchild clearly needed company? Warmth flooded my chest. Thick, bright, overwhelming. I love you, Grandma, I said softly. She squeezed my hand. I know, sweetheart, and I'm not done yet. A small shiver ran through me. What do you mean? She stood up, adjusting her lavender sweater with a seriousness that reminded me of a general preparing for battle. Her eyes held a mischievous spark I recognized. A spark that usually meant plans, trouble, or both. I didn't come just to keep you company, she announced. I came because it's time we fix this family. My breath caught. Fix it. How? Grandma pointed toward the door, determination radiating from her like heat. We, she said decisively, are going to your parents' house. Wait, what? Grandma, no. No way. I stood so abruptly the coffee mug on the table wobbled, sloshing dangerously close to the rim. My pulse surged in my throat, sharp and panicked. The warmth from everything Grandma had told me moments earlier drained from my chest and was replaced with cold dread. Grandma raised one eyebrow, her legendary eyebrow, the one that had disciplined 3 generations without her ever needing to lift a hand. Do you think I walked all the way to your apartment in the snow just for pie? She asked, unimpressed. Get your coat. I swallowed hard. Grandma, I'm serious. I can't just show up there. They'll freak out. She planted her hands on her hips. Let them. A good family freak out is overdue. I stared at her, a strange mixture of fear and disbelief tangling inside me. There were, undeniably, 2 immovable forces in this family. My father and the woman currently standing in my living room, staring me down like I was 10 years old again and refusing to go to school. Grandma, I tried again, voice tight. What if this just makes things worse? What's worse? She countered calmly. Than spending Thanksgiving alone, thinking your family hates you? My lips parted, but no words came out. She had a point, one I didn't want to hear. Fear is fine, she added, softening. Avoidance is not. Then she spun toward the door with the finality of a queen issuing a decree. 5 minutes. I'm timing you. I almost laughed because the situation was absurd. But the truth was, underneath all the fear, a tiny flicker of longing warmed my chest. A small part of me wanted to go, wanted to see them, wanted something, anything, to break the suffocating silence of the past 3 months. 5 minutes later, I had thrown on my coat, scarf, and boots, and somehow, against every instinct to run back upstairs and lock the door, I found myself walking beside her toward her old beige sedan. Snow drifted quietly around us, soft flakes catching the glow of the streetlights like falling stars. The car creaked when she opened the door. I slid into the passenger seat, my nerves twisting my stomach into tight knots. Grandma hummed under her breath as she started the engine, as if we were on our way to the grocery store and not to the emotional front lines of my life. Halfway down the first block, she asked, Do you remember the Thanksgiving you spilled cranberry sauce on your uncle's white sweater? I groaned instantly. How could I forget? He still brings it up every year like it was a personal attack. He didn't bring it up this year, she said, turning the wheel with calm confidence. I blinked. What do you mean? Because someone was missing. The truth of that hit me harder than I expected. I looked out the window to hide the sting in my eyes. We passed familiar landmarks. The corner store, where I used to buy candy after school. The old playground with rusted swings. The long stretch of road where I'd learned to ride a bike while Dad jogged behind me, ready to catch me if I fell. Everything looked the same, but I felt like I had aged a decade since the last time. I'd driven these streets. My voice came out small. Grandma, what if Dad says something hurtful again? Without missing a beat, she replied, then I'll say something worse. A small laugh escaped me. You can't protect me from everything. No, she said softly, eyes on the road. But I can stand beside you while you face it. The car grew quiet after that. The snow thickened, tapping softly against the windshield like delicate fingertips, begging to be let in. The world looked muted, softened, no sharp edges, just white, gentle quiet. Then suddenly, we turned onto a street I knew too well. My parents' street. My heart began thundering, wild, uneven. I curled my hands into fists in my lap to steady myself. And then I saw it. My childhood home. Warm yellow windows glowed against the snow. Shadows moved inside, the silhouettes of my cousins, my sister, my uncles and aunts. I could almost hear the muffled chatter and bursts of laughter even before Grandma parked. They were all there. Everyone except me. The sight pierced something inside me, a deep ache I'd been pretending didn't exist. Grandma turned off the engine, but didn't move. Instead, she reached over and placed her hand on mine. Her skin was warm despite the winter air. One more thing, she said softly. Whatever happens in there, remember this. You deserve to be heard, and you deserve to be loved. Don't shrink yourself. My eyes burned. I nodded slowly, unable to trust my voice. She smiled, then pushed open her door. I followed her, boots crunching through the fresh snow. Each step felt heavier, echoing with months of unresolved pain. My breath fogged in front of me, shaky, uneven. We walked up the porch steps together. The smell of roasted turkey and sage drifted through the cracks of the door, familiar enough to make my throat tighten. Grandma knocked. The knock echoed through my body like a drum beat. Seconds passed, long, stretching seconds. Then the door opened. My mother stood there, apron dusted with flour, her hair pulled back in the same messy bun she always wore on holidays. Her eyes widened the instant she saw us, saw me. She froze. Mom, I whispered. Her lips parted. Her breath hitched. Her eyes shimmered, filling with tears so quickly she didn't have time to blink them away. Baby, she breathed, voice cracking. Behind her, footsteps approached. My father appeared at her shoulder, wiping his hands on a dish towel. When his gaze met mine, he stopped cold. His jaw tensed, his face tightened. But behind all of that, behind the hard exterior, something flickered in his eyes. Shock, fear, hope, regret, longing, something raw and unguarded. The silence swelled until I thought it might shatter the air. And then Grandma, in classic Grandma fashion, stepped forward and broke it with her no-nonsense voice. Well, are you going to let us freeze out here? Or are you going to welcome your son home? The doorway felt like a fragile portal, thin as glass, powerful as a storm. One step over that threshold, and everything could change, or nothing could. The uncertainty pulsed in my chest like a second heartbeat. My mother reacted first. With a trembling breath, she closed the distance between us in 2 quick steps and wrapped her arms around me so tightly it startled me. Her hands clutched the back of my coat, like she was afraid I might disappear if she let go. Oh, sweetheart, she whispered into my shoulder, her voice cracking under the weight of months of silence. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Her tears soaked through the fabric of my jacket, warm and desperate. Something inside me, something hardened and bruised, shattered completely. I hugged her back, my throat burning. My eyes stung as a wave of emotion crashed over me. For months, my mind had replayed every moment of our last argument, twisting each memory until I could barely breathe from the hurt. But in my mother's trembling embrace, all that bitterness dissolved into something rawer, deeper. Pain mixed with longing. When she finally pulled back, Wiping her cheeks with the heel of her hand, the room fell silent, suspended, caught between past wounds and the possibility of healing. My father stood a few steps behind her, arms pressed rigidly at his sides, his jaw tight, his eyes locked on me with an intensity that made my stomach flip. He looked the same, yet completely different. The anger that had fueled our fight wasn't there. Instead, something softer flickered beneath his stern expression. Guilt, maybe, or regret, or fear. But no words came from him. Not yet. "Come inside," he said finally, his voice rougher than I remembered, like he had spoken the words 100 times in his mind, but never out loud. Inside, the familiar warmth of the house enveloped me instantly. It smelled exactly like every Thanksgiving of my childhood. Roasted turkey, sage stuffing, cinnamon, cloves, and the faint sugary sweetness of Grandma's backup apple pie cooling on the counter. The air was rich with memory, tugging me back into a life I'd convinced myself I no longer belonged to. My cousins peeked around the corner, their whispering voices carrying. My younger sister stood frozen near the oven, her mouth half open, a serving spoon dangling from her hand. Even the dog paused mid-tail wag, sniffing the air as if confirming I was real. At the long dining table, plates rested mid-bite, glasses half raised, conversation cut short. My old chair, second from the end, where I always sat, remained untouched, napkin neatly folded, plate pristine. Waiting. My father motioned stiffly. "Sit." I approached the chair slowly, every step weighted with hesitation. When I finally sat down, the wooden seat creaked faintly beneath me, and I felt a strange warmth unfurl in my chest, a feeling equal parts ache and relief. My father took the seat across from me, his posture straight, shoulders stiff, as if bracing himself for impact. Grandma sat beside me with a victorious little smile, the sort that said, "I told you this would work." Dinner resumed, but the air was heavy with unsaid things. My mother kept glancing at me every few seconds, her eyes scanning my face like she was afraid to miss even a flicker of emotion. Finally, my father set down his fork and took a steadying breath. "I owe you an apology," he said. The room stilled, as if someone had pressed pause on the world. He swallowed, his throat working. I said things I shouldn't have. I reacted out of fear, not understanding. When you walked out, he paused, eyes lowering to the table for a moment. I thought I had lost you. The words hit me like a quiet, emotional punch. He raised his eyes again, and the rawness there startled me. I shouldn't have tried to force your life onto a path that made sense only to me. Writing, he exhaled shakily. It felt unsafe, unpredictable, and I didn't know how to protect you from something I didn't understand. For a long beat, neither of us spoke. Then I said quietly, "It hurt. When you said what you said, I carried it for months." His jaw tightened, but his voice softened. "I know, and I will regret it for the rest of my life." My mother reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her eyes reddened. "We should have called you. We should have come to see you. We let pride get in the way of compassion. I'm sorry, sweetheart." Emotion rose in my throat, thick and overwhelming. My father continued, more gently than I had ever heard him speak. "You don't have to forgive me tonight, but I want to understand you. I want to know what drives you, what writing means to you. I want to try, if you'll let me." Tears blurred my vision, but this time, they weren't just from pain. They were from the unmistakable, aching feeling of being wanted. "That's all I ever wanted," I whispered. The tension that had strangled the room loosened, unraveling slowly like a knot, finally giving way. My sister, always the first to lighten a heavy moment, leaned forward with a timid grin. So, um, does this mean I don't get the extra pie slice now that you're back? Laughter rippled around the table, hesitant at first, then growing, warm and real. The kind of laughter that stitched old wounds with invisible thread. Dinner continued, now with a softness that had been missing for years. My cousins told ridiculous stories. My mother kept piling food onto my plate like I hadn't eaten in a month. Grandma watched it all with a satisfied smirk, lifting her fork like a queen presiding over a victorious feast. When dessert was served, my father turned to me with a tentative curiosity. "Will you tell us about your writing?" he asked. "I want to hear everything." The room brightened. "Yeah," I said, smiling, despite the tears still clinging to my lashes. "I'd love to." And I told them about my stories, my characters, the world I was building, the dreams I had tucked away in notebooks, and late nights. For the first time, every face around the table looked not with judgment, but with genuine interest. Later, when we gathered in the living room near the glowing fireplace, plates empty and hearts fuller than they had been in a long time, Grandma nudged my shoulder. "Told you," she whispered, voice low and warm. "Family doesn't break. It bends, it bruises, but it doesn't break." I looked around the room, at the people I loved, the people who had hurt me, the people I had missed every single day. A long, steady breath left me. "No," I said softly, "it doesn't break." Outside, snow drifted quietly from the sky, blanketing the world in softness. Inside, for the first time in months, I felt home again. And it all began with a knock on my door.